For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and welcome to episode 2 of the Brian Cole story. Brian, there is a lot to unpack from episode 1, so we should probably do a little recap, which would make my mother very happy. So we do Bible studies every Sunday morning here at the house. Mom comes over, and with my wife and the kids, done it for about 2 years. And the first thing, every Sunday morning, Mom always says, well, let's do a recap. And I kind of make fun of her for it. I'm like, okay, let's just keep going. I want to get through the Bible at some point. So ironically, I'm doing a recap. So this recap is brought to you by Diane Dryden.
Amen.
The last episode, we covered several things. I think we're up to around middle school age. We talked about your dad, being told that you're a loser from including your dad and teachers and other people, getting bullied, getting picked on. You had your first cigarette at age 10, and that was when older kids kind of accepted you a little bit, because I think that's what that cigarette really kind of symbolized, was acceptance and the sense of belonging. They introduced you to marijuana, maybe some dirty magazines. Then we kind of touched on at the end Satanism. And I also want to bring up, when I watched the show with my family on Sunday, the first episode, there was something that you said that I didn't really pick up on when we were doing the show, but I noticed that when I was watching it, it was about fear. And it was when these older kids are now standing up for you with the same kids that used to be bullying you, you recognized the look on their face, and that was fear. So I'm assuming that's partly where we're going with this, but I don't know why I didn't catch that the first time. So quickly, how important was that for you when you saw fear? What did that feel like for you when you saw that on their faces?
Power and control that I finally got, because I was always the one not in control and the one being overpowered all the time. And now I saw that there was a little bit of that in me. And, even though it didn't have nothing to do with me, it was the kids, I latched onto that. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome to be on this side of the fence now instead of the other.
Yeah, right. So we left off, I think it was about middle school, right? Yeah. I don't know the exact age. We talked a lot about around that age 10. But we're, 13, 14 years old, middle school age, right?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna probably just go back to maybe 11, 12 real quick to lead into that, to kind of tie this all in with my brother and my father and the things that were going on there. Okay. So we go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So still at a young age, probably 12-ish, 13-ish, the relationship between me and my younger brother was not good at all. Like I said, Dad always paid attention to him, and I got accused for things he did. So I was really ticked at my brother. And with this new power and control thing and this new radical thinking, I was very mean to my brother. And I don't mean that in a general sense. I mean, there was times my brother was actually scared to come home from school with me. We had a half-mile-long driveway. We lived out in the country. My mom didn't come home until about a half hour after we got home, so we were at home alone, and I would scare the heck out of my brother and attack him. One day I literally took my dad's bow and arrows off and chased my brother around. He thought I was going to shoot him with it. He jumped out of a 2-story window to get away from me. I remember one time I was trying to get, between the hatred for my brother and trying to get him into the things I was into to get him in trouble.
That makes sense. That's a brother. That's what brothers do, right?
Yeah, we lived right above a creek, O'Neill Creek, and one day I had him come down and I got him to smoke a joint with me. So I was maybe 12, he was 10, 9, something like that, and we crossed a log that went across the creek. I got him high, and when we came back across, he was so high for the first time and young that he fell off the log into the creek, and I'm just sitting there laughing at him. But then after I finally kind of helped him out, and I'm like, oh boy, he's soaking wet. We got to go in the house. How do we explain this to Mom? We're both just wasted, So that's how the thing went with my brother. There was a hate relationship there with me, and I just dogged him and his whole young life. There was I remember one time when we were living out there, and my dad used to find all my pipes and stuff all the time. My dad was like a cop, and I'll explain that in a minute. But one time his dog got me busted. He used to take my pipes and stuff and find them, so I wouldn't bring pipes home anymore. I would make one of those, I don't know if you're familiar, make one of those pop can pipes you push in the pop can and poke holes in it.
Sure.
And then that way I could crush it and I just throw it over the bank and hopefully it hit the creek. Well, one day my dad calls me outside and he's like, "What is this?" You know, and he pulls up a pop can that's partially crushed. And here the dog had went down and found it and carried it up and dropped it on the porch. So my dog even busted me one day, let alone my own dad, man. So we got to get some humor in there. And
Yeah.
that was, I mean, I wasn't funny at the time because obviously I got locked
You
up
have to
for
find
that,
a little
but-
levity, man, or you just go
Yeah.
crazy.
So, you know, fast forward to probably 12 now, and like I said, maybe I didn't say, my mom forced us, the kids and even my dad, to go to church. We went to this really stale Lutheran church, and I hated it. And then she signed me up for confirmation.
Oh.
And I remember being so angry about confirmation and plus the satanic stuff in my mind that I acted out in confirmation class just as much as I did in school. And they came to my mom one day and said, "Listen, if he doesn't straighten up in here, we're gonna have to kick him out." I remember having a hate relationship with that church and the pastor and just all these fake Christians, just like my dad. And you know, I started stealing stuff from churches, including the church we went to. I remember one time I found these dudes. I was a drummer, played drums all through school. And I met up with these older guys that were in a band that lived up in this apartment. And I got in with these dudes, you know, they were potheads and stuff. And they were in need of some sound equipment. I'm like, "I got you," you know. So I went to that Lutheran church that I was part of, and I stole all their sound equipment and just gave it to these guys, and they just gave me a bunch of dope, you know. And I'm like, "It's all good." Well, a few days later, my dad calls me in, and the pastor kind of knew that it was me that did that. And
What?
he's like, "You know, I'll give you the choice. You either bring that stuff back, or I'm going to turn it all in." And so I brought the stuff back.
What did you say? Hold on a second.
Yeah.
How did you get that back?
Oh,
Did you
I
steal
went
it
and
from
told
them,
him, I'm
or
like,
just-
"Dude, I got
oh.
busted, man."
Okay.
I got to get the stuff back. It was
Okay.
just a bunch of big speakers and microphones and stuff.
Okay.
So anyway, and in that same church, you know, on top of stealing from churches, there was one time back then speeders were like the thing. You could order them out of magazines, all these black caddies and white crosses and stuff, and get them by the hundreds. And I was speeded out all the time on those things. And I was awake for 3 days and nights. And I remember waking up one day in our Lutheran church. I broke in and slept down in the basement. I guess pastor found out about that too. But yeah, so just a lot of really stupid stuff. And like I said last time, you know, I was going around and you know, breaking into churches and getting the bread from the Catholic churches for these guys for their rituals and stuff. But other than that, during that time, 11 to 13, 14-ish, doing a lot of skipping school. My grandma had lived just probably 10, 15 blocks away from the school. I would skip and go over there because I knew my Aunt Deb that lived with her had this big clam thing in her bedroom, and it was full of $100 bills. And I would go in there and, you know, snag one or two at a time, you know, maybe once every couple of weeks or something, hoping she wouldn't notice it. And then I would go and skip school with other kids, and I'd treat them, and I'd bring them down to, you know, pizza places and buy them pizzas and records and cassette tapes. Remember them?
Oh yeah.
And just to be that guy that everybody looked at,
Yeah.
and depended upon. You know, hey, this guy's giving us stuff and this and that, and they would always cover me when I needed to be covered, because when I started bringing stuff home, you know, that I didn't have the money for, these guys would cover for me. I said, my mom or dad calls you, man, you gave this to me, you know, and blah blah blah. So I was building my rep, and I was the man. I was the go-to guy. And
you're 12.
Stealing. I'm 12 years old. Yep.
That just blows my mind.
Now, one of the times, there was a few times I skipped school. Now, I want to bring this up because other than my mom, which I couldn't really have a relationship with because my dad in the picture, there was only one person I remember in my life that I had adoration for and that I loved. And that was my great-grandma, Irma Hilp. She came from Germany, and she was in an old age home right across the street from where my grandma lived, where I was stealing this money. So once in a while, I would go over there and visit my great grandma, and she would tell me stories in German and stuff like that. And I just loved her. And I remember specifically that was the only time in my life that I remember that when she died, I had tears for a human being. So there was still love in me.
What was it about her
I don't know. She just accepted me for who I was and never
that
treated
the
me.
acceptance
Yeah, I
that
think
wasn't
so.
she wasn't told she didn't beat you, she didn't tell you you're a loser, she
No.
didn't care if you looked any way or acted a certain, didn't
Well,
matter. It's I love you.
yeah, that I love you no matter what. She never treated me any different, knowing all the things that she knew about me, and she probably
Right.
didn't know a lot, but
Well,
she just never treated any different.
yeah, the kids and grandmas and great grandmas, yeah, they know what's going on. They don't need to know
Yeah.
everything to know. They know what's going on.
Yep. So there we are. There was a time around that time, 12 years old or so. Remember specifically as one of the worst times with my dad. My dad got into all kinds of weird hobbies. He got into birds and had, bird feeders up outside the window and had binoculars and the bird books and all that kind of crazy stuff. And one day he calls me outside and went by the bird feeder, and there was this dead squirrel down there. And he's like, "Why did you kill the squirrel?" And I'm like, "I didn't kill the squirrel, man." And I turned around and all of a sudden, boom, I was on the ground and I was out. And my dad had full punched me in the middle of my back. I don't know how long I was out. I woke up, I couldn't breathe. And he was sitting there yelling at me, for killing the squirrel. And eventually I started to, I still couldn't even talk, man. I'm starting to crawl my way into the house because I couldn't get up. And got into the house, laid on the couch. My mom was asking me, what's going on? Dad was still out there tripping out. And I still couldn't really talk because I was out of air. And probably, I don't know, half hour later or something, Dad comes in, looks down at me on the couch, says, "Yeah, I guess I was wrong, and a raccoon or something got at the squirrel," because he thought I shot it with a BB gun or a pellet gun or something. And no apologies, no sorry, just that and gone. That's how my dad, that was a perfect picture of my father. And one of there's two things about my dad that I really hated other than the beating. And that was the lectures, which are an hour to 2 hours long every time, the school called or whatever. Oh, here we go with the lecture, man. I'd rather get a beating. Please beat me. And, and then he would record us. He would record them. He'd have a tape recorder hidden and record our conversation. And I always remember this, if things don't jive with what your teacher says, click, and he busts out the tape recorder, And I always call him a cop because he would have his friends, when I would leave or he'd found out I'd leave, he would have his friends following me around wherever I went. So he was like a cop to me, man. That was my relationship with my dad. There were times he threatened to cut my hair. I loved my hair. I love long hair. He would not allow it. Put the bowl on my head. Yeah, I'd run away from home from that. I remember one time, I don't know, I brought up something about earrings. If I ever catch you with an earring, I'll bust your butt, and all this. So I went and got an earring. That was the relationship. And then, but that was the relationship with me and my father. There was no relationship. I hated his guts. I couldn't stand him. And that was one of the many reasons I didn't mind being locked up. Because
it sounds like it was mutual.
Yeah.
So, didn't sound like he particularly cared for you either.
Yeah. So at one point, my mom and my dad got separated finally. And I'm like, "Oh, thank you. Let's please divorce him." Yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds horrible, but
yeah.
All right. You have to be looking at this going, "Oh,
yes.
This is maybe we have some normalcy."
Yeah. So mom moved to Chippewa with me and my brother. Yeah. And it was a cool time because I got away with a lot more stuff, and Dad didn't really follow me around as much. He'd still have it done, but I learned how to get around that sometimes when I knew who to look for and stuff by now. But one day I skipped school and had a party when my mom was at work, and I didn't really drink alcohol. I was a pothead, speeders, acid, all that. But I had alcohol at the house and had a bunch of people over and girls. And somehow somebody found out. My mom called my dad, and my dad came over. And, of course, everybody else split, left me alone. And my dad started threatening me. Man, I went and pulled out a scissors, and I'm like, "You don't even come near me. You ain't even supposed to be here. I'll kill you," and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, my dad was a big brute. He was a big dude. He knocked that scissor out of my hand, took me down, and put his leg on my throat and called the cops and kept me that way until the cops came there. And so that was one of the incidences there. that was when I really started getting into the girls. And I remember I was in the boxing club once in a while because my brother was part of that. I wanted to go in and show him up. And the boxing coach had a really cute daughter named Sue. And I remember I wanted to get in, with her. Yeah. And I went out and got her one night, and we skipped out of her house, and she had a girlfriend with her, and I went out and got them drunk because it's always easier to get what you want with the girls when you get them drunk. And her friend ended up getting so drunk she passed out. So I carried her and took her and her girlfriend in my arms back to my house, pushed her friend through my window and plopped her on the floor, and went in and had my way with this girl. And I think that was that with that. But that's just how I'm just trying to give you an idea of how my life was. Just didn't care. It was all about me fulfilling my pleasures, my satisfactions. People were already at that age just there for one thing, and that was to be used and manipulated to get the things that I wanted to get. Mm-hmm. So now, about 14 years old, I was at school, I think, and they brought the drug dogs in, found a whole bunch of weed in my locker, and that was my first major arrest. I ended up getting sent to a foster home in Chippewa. Now, at first it was kind of cool because I was away from dad, and the foster dad wasn't too bad, and he had a son named Jeremy, and Jeremy was a drummer, and he had a whole big drum set in the house, and up to that point, I was just a percussionist. I had never played full drum set, so I got into the drum set, and they actually went out and got me private lessons. Even remember the guy's name, Denny Lester in Eau Claire down on Water Street. So things were going good for a while, and all of a sudden at one point, man, I woke up middle of the night feeling something, and here this foster dad of mine's rubbing on me. And so I punched him and I took off and ran away, and obviously got in trouble for that, because no one's going to believe me over him, and they didn't. So it was at that point when I was 14 years old when I got my first arrest, went to that foster home, and from there all the way until the end of 17, I was locked up in all kinds of places: group homes, foster homes, shelter homes, treatment centers. Pretty soon they ran out of places to put me and stuck me in between Lutheran Sacred Heart Hospital psychiatric wards for a year and a half, and then eventually Lincoln Hills Boys School. Now, it was during this time that I really didn't care. I loved it because, number one, almost all the places I was in was co-ed. So had access to all the naughty girls. Yeah, hey, I ain't even got a bag now or get them drunk. They're just willing to give it up. So I'm on that. And then the drugs in these places. Oh, I knew how to manipulate these psychiatric people and got the medications that I wanted to keep me high all the time. And but the place that probably I had the most memory of besides Lincoln was Luther Hospital psychiatric ward in Eau Claire. A lot of things happened there. I was a big wig there. I remember almost every night us kids used to, because we had our own section, it was kids section, adult section. We used to sit and play spin the bottle. And there was this one cute girl that came in, and we found out, through Spin the Bottle that she was a virgin and stuff. And I'm like, okay, she's mine. So when I told one of my friends, hey, when the bottle lands on her, do this. And so when the bottle landed on her, they dared her to have sex with me. And she said, okay. So already, again, not really a Satanist, but understanding this stuff and hating the church, I took her down to, and this was probably, later on at night, 8, 9 o'clock, just before they locked the doors down at night. You get to a certain level, you can leave. And I took her down to the chapel in the hospital, and I had sex with her right on the altar and left blood intentionally. So there were two things in my mind: getting what I wanted and disrespecting the church. There was also one other thing that was going on at Luther. Remember I said I was in boxing. When you're on a high enough level in the hospital there, they let you have, time out and furloughs and all that kind of stuff. So found out that there was a Eau Claire boxing club that was just probably 6 blocks away in the school down the road there. And I signed up for it. So I was boxing out of the psychiatric ward. And I remember my first and only boxing match was held at the Eau Claire Civic Center back in that day. And my my opponent was a foreign exchange student from Wales, and it was both our first boxing matches. They could hardly find anybody for me because of my weight division and my age. But this guy matched up, and man, by that time, I was smoking a pack or two a day, but I'm the man, right? I got tattoos now already that I'm giving myself in these places, and I go up in there, I'm gonna knock this dude out first round, man. At halfway through that first round, I'm about dying.
All right,
catch my breath. I'm like, why ain't this dude getting knocked out?
Yeah,
man?
right.
Well, it went all three of our little 2-minute rounds, and I ended up winning. So I am undefeated in my boxing career. So I got that to brag on.
Yeah, there you go, 1-0.
So again, it's playtime, man. I don't care if I'm locked up. I got sex. I got drugs. I get to do boxing and it's game time. I don't care. So this was my experience through all these places, and eventually I ended up in Lincoln Hills. I don't remember what had happened, but I ended up in Lincoln Hills, and again, it was co-ed. I ended up getting a job in the laundry department there, and we were on the truck at 4:00 in the morning picking the laundry up from the different places. And during that little time, we had a girl on the crew with us. There were three of us back there, 2 guys and a girl, and getting it on with the girl and everything else. And the last thing I'll leave with is, at that time they had the Scared Straight program. Remember those? I've
heard of it, but I don't really remember. Oh, isn't it like, no, I think I've seen like Saturday Night Live skits or something.
Yeah.
where they come in and they try to tell you all these horrible things. Okay, yeah. I'm familiar with it.
So they would go and take like 6 or 12 of the people in Lincoln Hills that they thought would probably end up in prison someday, and they would bust us up to Green Bay Correctional Institution. So I went up there, and I was familiar with Scared Straight, and you know what? I'm the man now, and I know they can't touch me. You ain't going to tell me, you ain't going to talk to me any old way. So we went in there, and, they're raising their voices, sticking their finger in my face, and I'm just sitting there smiling at them, and knowing they can't touch me. And I bring that up for a reason, because when we get to the part where I ended up in Green Bay Correctional Institution, that was kind of on my mind a little bit on the bus on the way there, man. I hope these dudes don't remember me, right?
Yeah.
So Lincoln Hills Boys School, I ended up being there until I aged. I was probably just a few weeks or whatever before I was 18 years old, and I was released. I remember I was released with this other guy who was a friend of mine in there, and we both got out the same day. We ended up, he had a big one of those big boom boxes that he was released with, and him and I hitchhiked to Chippewa. We both worked for my dad for 2 weeks, got a big check, hitchhiked up here to Mellon, Wisconsin, and found out, one of the one cop that they had at that time, he was he didn't care about the drugs and stuff. And I remember swimming in the little round pool things that they had there and all that. So it's funny that I'm back up in this area now. But anyway, so here I am, 17 years old. I'm out. I do this. I end up back home somehow, and we'll end with, now I find out that I can join the Army. And this is how bad my mind was. This will give me permission to kill people. So I signed up. I signed up for the Army, and we'll leave it at that, and we'll pick it up there next time. So yeah, that was my childhood from 12 to 17, man.
All right, so let me circle back here. Psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
How do you, forget ignorance, I assume you have to, I don't know, there must be, how did you end up in a psychiatric ward? I mean, we're talking about group homes, we're talking about treatment centers, then Lincoln Hills, but psychiatric ward, how did that come to be?
A lot of kids ended up there because there was no place else for them, or no place that would accept them, or they got kicked out of all the other places. It wasn't necessarily you had mental problems. It's just like the prisons today. I don't know what the statistics are or were or whatever, but probably at least half of the guys that are in prison right now, they don't belong there. They belong in mental institutions. But because of the lack of space in mental institutions, they're in prison.
But
so
for you, it was the
same
opposite. It was because was it because you were a minor? So it's a little bit different. There isn't a lot of places that you can send a minor, but like an adult, we had tons of prisons.
Oh yeah, but yeah, and most all the adults that I knew in there, they were crazy. Boy, we would mess with them all the time.
And I'm sure they appreciated that.
I'm sure they did.
So how have you? Obviously, God has played a huge role in your life and where you are now.
Yeah.
But at the time, a lot of what you were talking about was in reference to other girls or two girls.
Yeah.
How have you been able to, when you do think about those things, and we all think about things that we've done and go, what was I thinking? Obviously, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
In that situation with the girl and the chapel, when you look back on that, how do you reconcile that in your mind?
I don't. Jesus did. It's been forgiven. There's only been a couple things in my life. Yeah. Am I sorry for the things I did? Yeah. Do I wish I could go back and change some of those things? Absolutely, especially the things dealing with people. The rest of it, I can't really honestly say that I can, because if I didn't go through the things I did, I wouldn't be where I'm at in my life right now and be able to minister to the people I minister to now and talk to the kids that I can talk to now about issues and enjoy life the way that I'm enjoying life right now. But the people that I messed up and messed with, yes, I wish I could go back and change that. But you know what? I don't. It's not on. It's on them to forgive me now. And whether they do or not, that's not on me. All I know is my stuff's been lifted. And that might seem like a cop out. It might seem like, well, you don't care. No, I just understand that God has forgiven me for the things I did, and I accept that.
Yeah. So obviously, with our first episode about the things that kind of lined up for your next part, right? These are all the things set in motion, and clearly you ended, I think, last episode talking about there's still hope, right? Because at any point, somebody can make a choice and say, no, I'm not going to. Or a parent can recognize something and do what they can to kind of put a stop to it. So since that didn't happen, now we're getting into teenage years and up through about 17.
Yeah, and getting worse and worse.
Getting worse.
And worse.
So that's just, I guess I didn't realize that you were in all these places. So all those kids that were older than you, that stood up for you, that first gave the cigarette, and all your classmates were, scared of you. You never saw them again.
No.
Interesting.
So where I want to land today, as far as what can we learn about all this, or what can we take away from all this, I really wanted to talk about choices, at least for a minute. Choices that we make. It's one of the things I share at school. So if we remember now, when we go back to the beginning, what was it you just said that brought me into all this, that I allowed to bring me into all this?
It was a cigarette, but that symbolized acceptance and a sense of belonging.
Cigarette and acceptance. So there was my first bad choice. I mean, probably not my first one, but my first major bad choice. So when it came time for those kids, when they handed me that joint,
it was easy.
Made it a little bit easier to accept that and make that second bad choice. And then when they handed me the Naughty magazine, that was my third bad choice, and it was a little bit easier now to accept that bad choice, because I already made some bad ones. You see where I'm going with this? As we make these bad choices, it makes it easier and easier for the next one, to the point where we're not even thinking about what are the consequences going to be of this anymore. You just accept it because you're used to it. That's what the Bible, I think, Romans chapter 1 talks about. We trade the truth for a lie, and instead of, worshiping the Creator, we're worshiping creation, and we're worshiping things like, birds, people, animals, and pretty soon we're crawling on our belly like serpents. And when we get to that point, He's got to let His hands off us. So that represents, the man, birds, four-footed animals, and serpents. We start out with these little things, and we go into deeper and deeper things, and pretty soon we're so far gone that God turns us over to ourselves. That one of the things that I talk to the kids in school about is with these choices is there's some kids still out there that have this mindset that, I'm going to go to this party because my friend or my friends are going to be there. I'm not going to drink or smoke dope or anything like that. I'm just going to go to the party, and they're I know they're going to be using and drinking, but I just want to be there. Let me tell you something, man. Just being in those places puts you at risk, right? You say, I won't do drugs. I won't be an alcoholic. I won't drink. Guess what? I probably had the same mindset when I was a young kid too.
Yeah.
Nobody grows up thinking, you know what? When I get older, I want to be a drug addict. Nobody, when I'm speaking at those schools, especially the elementary schools, and there ain't probably too many kids that are sitting in that bench thinking, I want to be like this guy when he grows up and be a drug addict. No, they got that's the farthest thing from their mind, and it's the same with parents. My kid will never grow up doing that. Guess what? My parents probably thought the same thing. Listen, I didn't wake up one day and just decide to put a meth pipe in my mouth or put crack up my nose. It all started with the cigarette. It all started with a cigarette. And you want to talk, kids don't want to hear about, what do they call that? The gateway stuff. Cigarette is a gateway. When you're hanging around with kids who are smoking cigarettes, I guarantee you, I promise you that there's somebody in that crowd that's doing more than smoking a cigarette. Now, when they bust something out and you smoke that joint, you will, because you already made that bad choice to smoke that cigarette and be around them when you smoke that joint. Now you're in that clique, and I guarantee you within that pothead group, there's someone in there sticking something up their nose or a needle in your arm, and when they offer that to you, you see where I'm going with this?
So it isn't necessarily, and somebody, I get there's kind of two sides to that, is one specific thing a gateway. But I think what I'm hearing from you is it isn't necessarily or specifically a cigarette is an actual gateway, or marijuana isn't specifically a gateway. It's the environment around it.
Exactly.
It's not like, hey kids, go out and, as long as you have a cigarette, it's fine. Just don't be around other people. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like next episode we're going to be discussing. So we're up to 17, and you had already mentioned the Army. Yes. So the Army, and obviously we don't really have any of these things scripted. We just kind of talk until it's 30 minutes is up, which I think it is about.
It
is about right now. So we're talking about the Army next time, and up until age what? Give us one more tease. Army and
Army and my first prison incarceration.
You don't count the other ones? Lincoln Hills?
Nope. Oh, that was 10 years, brother.
Technically, I was not in prison. Brian, thanks so much for doing these. I know it's emotional stuff. At least I'm not kidding. Like stuff for me that's it gets emotional just hearing these things. But the nice thing is I know where you are today.
Yeah, hey man.
So I know how this ends.
Yes, we do. Just like we know how the book ends.
Yeah, because if I didn't know how this ended, man, I would not be doing these. Because it's hard to hear some of this stuff, man.
Yeah, and that's probably the minimal stuff here I'm sharing. There's stuff that I will never be able to share.
Thanks, brother.
We all got stuff like that, right?
What?
Some of us hate it better, brother.
Who are you talking to? I don't even know what you're doing. All right, we'll see you next week.
I love you, man.
I love you too.